The November rain hammered against the windows of the small Brooklyn apartment like an insistent visitor who refused to be ignored. Amelia Carter stood at the kitchen sink, washing the same plate for the third time, her mind somewhere far from the cramped space that had been home for the past 22 years. Outside, the city moved with its usual indifference, car horns blaring, distant sirens wailing, the muffled voices of neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. It was 7:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and her father hadn't come home in 3 days. "Mia, did you remember to pay the electric bill?" Emma's voice cut through her thoughts. Her 17-year-old sister sat at the small dining table, textbooks spread around her like a fortress against the chaos of their lives. "Yeah, I took care of it yesterday," Amelia replied, forcing brightness into her voice that she didn't feel. She dried her hands on a faded dish towel and turned to face Emma. "How's the college essay coming along?" Emma's face lit up, the same way it always did when she talked about her future. "I think I'm almost done. Mrs. Patterson said my draft was really strong. She thinks I have a real shot at that scholarship." Amelia's heart squeezed. Emma deserved everything. The scholarship, the college experience, the life their mother had dreamed for both of them before cancer took her 3 years ago. At least one of them should escape this neighborhood, this cycle of barely surviving. "That's amazing, Em. Mom would be so proud." Amelia crossed the small kitchen and pressed a kiss to her sister's dark hair. "I'm proud of you. When do you think Dad will be back?" Emma asked quietly, her pen hovering over her notebook. The question hung in the air like smoke. Amelia had been asking herself the same thing for 72 hours. Michael Carter's disappearances weren't new. He'd been vanishing for years, ever since Mom got sick. First for a few hours, then days. He always came back smelling of cheap liquor and regret, full of promises he'd never keep. But something felt different this time. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're okay. We always figure it out, right?" Amelia smiled, though it felt like cracking glass on her face. The knock at the door came at exactly 8:03 p.m. It wasn't the casual knock of a neighbor or the quick rap of a delivery person. This was deliberate, authoritative, the kind of knock that said whoever was on the other side knew you were home and had no intention of leaving until the door opened. Amelia's stomach dropped. Emma looked up, her brown eyes wide with the same instinct that was currently screaming warnings through Amelia's nervous system. "Stay here," Amelia whispered, moving toward the door. Through the peephole she could see 2 men in dark suits, standing with the kind of stillness that only came from absolute confidence. The hallway's flickering fluorescent light cast shadows across their faces, but she could make out enough. Square jaws, cold eyes, expensive watches that caught the light. These weren't men from the neighborhood. "Miss Carter, we know you're home. We just want to talk." The voice was smooth, almost polite, but it carried an edge that made her hand tremble on the doorknob. "Who are you?" she called through the door, proud that her voice didn't shake as much as her hands. "We work for someone your father knows. We need to discuss a business matter. It would be better if we came inside, more private." Every instinct told her not to open that door, but she also knew that men like these didn't need permission. If they wanted in, a flimsy apartment door wouldn't stop them. At least if she controlled the opening, she could control something. Amelia took a breath, sent a quick glance back at Emma, who had gone pale, and slowly opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. "What business?" she asked. The taller of the 2 men, mid-40s, with silver threading through his dark hair, offered what might have been a smile on someone else's face. On him, it looked like a business transaction. "My name is Vincent. This is my associate, Tony. We represent the Russo family. Your father has entered into certain financial agreements with our organization, and unfortunately, he's failed to honor those commitments." The words were careful, almost bureaucratic, but Amelia understood perfectly. Her father owed money, probably a lot of it, to people you didn't want to owe anything to. "I don't know anything about my father's business," she said firmly, "and he's not here." "We know," Vincent replied. "He hasn't been at his usual places either, which is why we're here speaking with you. May we come in? This conversation would be better had sitting down." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "Whatever my father owes, it has nothing to do with me or my sister. We don't have anything to give you." Tony, the younger one with hands like construction equipment, shifted his weight. "Miss Carter, you don't understand the situation. Then explain it from where you're standing," Amelia interrupted, her mother's stubbornness rising in her chest like armor. Vincent's expression hardened slightly, the pretense of politeness thinning. "Your father owes $250,000. He borrowed money for what he said were medical expenses, then continued borrowing for personal use. The terms were clear. The timeline has expired. Mr. Russo is not a patient man when it comes to broken agreements. The number hit Amelia like a physical blow. $250,000. It might as well have been $2 million. They barely made rent most months. Her 2 jobs, morning shift at the diner, evening shifts at the bookstore, covered their basic survival and nothing more. That's impossible, she whispered. We don't have that kind of money. We never did. Why would anyone give my father that much? That's a question you'd need to ask him, Vincent said, if he were here. But since he's chosen to make himself unavailable, the responsibility falls to his family. That's how these things work. That's not legal. Emma's voice rang out from behind Amelia. She had stood up, her young face pale but set with determination. You can't hold us responsible for his choices. Vincent's eyes shifted to Emma, and something that might have been sympathy flickered across his face before disappearing. Miss, I understand this seems unfair, but the agreements your father signed were clear about the terms of default. We're not here to create problems, we're here to find solutions. What kind of solutions? Amelia asked, though ice was already forming in her veins. Mr. Russo is willing to consider alternative arrangements. Your father made promises he can't keep, but perhaps his family can contribute in other ways. There are positions within our organization's legitimate enterprises: restaurants, property management, administrative work, honest employment to work towards settling the obligation. The words sounded reasonable, almost generous, but Amelia heard what wasn't being said. They wanted collateral, insurance, someone to hold accountable while her father hid from his mistakes. And if we refuse? She asked quietly. Vincent's pause said everything. Mr. Russo values keeping business matters organized and resolved. Outstanding debts create complications. It would be unfortunate if those complications extended to affect young people with promising futures. His eyes flickered meaningfully to Emma, to the college textbooks spread across the table, to the scholarship essays that represented escape from this life. Amelia felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking entirely but fracturing. She looked at her sister, 17 years old, with her mother's eyes and her mother's dreams. Emma, who'd spent the last 3 years helping raise herself because their father drowned in bottles and bad decisions while Amelia worked herself to exhaustion, keeping them afloat. Emma, who deserved none of this. I need time to think, Amelia said. Give me until tomorrow. I'm afraid that's not possible, Vincent interrupted. Mr. Russo has been more than patient. 3 months patient, to be precise. Your father has been avoiding us for weeks. Our presence here tonight is the final courtesy. We need an answer now, and we need someone to come with us to discuss terms directly with Mr. Russo. You mean you need someone to take, Amelia said flatly. We prefer to think of it as ensuring commitment to resolution, Tony offered, speaking for the first time. His voice was surprisingly soft for someone his size. Look, we're not here to create problems for you ladies, but business is business. Someone needs to stand for this obligation. Amelia's mind raced through impossible calculations. Run? They knew where Emma went to school. Fight? They were clearly prepared for resistance. Call the police? And tell them what? That her father borrowed money from people who operated in shadows, and now those shadows were at her door. There was only one answer that kept Emma safe. I'll go, Amelia heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere distant and decided. I'll go with you to meet Mr. Russo and discuss terms. But my sister stays here and stays out of this completely. That's non-negotiable. Mia, no, Emma started, but Amelia turned and gripped her sister's shoulders. Em, listen to me. I need you to stay here, keep studying, and remember that scholarship essay is due next week. Mrs. Patterson is expecting it. She tried to pour every ounce of meaning into her words, hoping Emma understood. Keep living. Keep fighting for your future. Don't let this trap you too. You can't do this. Emma's voice broke. This is his fault, not yours. I know, baby. I know. But right now, this is what keeps you safe. Amelia pulled her sister into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, memorizing the feeling. I'm going to fix this. I promise. Just stay here, lock the door, and I'll call you as soon as I can. She stepped back before her resolve could crumble, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall. She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door and reached for the one possession that mattered. Her mother's locket, the antique silver one that had been passed down through 3 generations of women who'd all survived impossible things. Her fingers closed around it, the metal warm from resting against her skin. Inside was a tiny photograph of her mother as a young woman, smiling with a freedom Amelia had never seen in person. Her mother, Elena, before life had worn her down, before sickness had stolen her. The locket was the only valuable thing they owned, but its value had nothing to do with money. Amelia fastened it around her neck, letting it rest against her heart like armor. "I'm ready," she said, turning back to the men at the door. "But I need your word, your actual word, that my sister will not be contacted, followed, or involved in any way. Whatever arrangement we make, it's between me and Mr. Russo. She's a minor, and she's innocent in all of this." Vincent studied her for a long moment, something like respect crossing his features. "You have my word, Miss Carter. Your sister won't be part of this equation. Mr. Russo actually prefers to keep family members separate from business matters when possible." It wasn't much, but it was all she had to work with. Amelia removed the chain lock and stepped into the hallway, not looking back at Emma because if she did, she'd never be able to walk away. She heard her sister crying, calling her name, but she kept moving forward, each step feeling like walking through water. The November rain was falling harder when they stepped outside, immediately soaking through her thin jacket. Vincent opened the door of a black SUV with tinted windows. Of course it was a black SUV with tinted windows, and gestured for her to enter. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. It was warm, the heat running, and the seats were softer than her own bed. The contrast to her life was so sharp it almost hurt. Tony climbed into the driver's seat while Vincent settled beside her in the back. Neither man spoke as the vehicle pulled away from the curb, away from the only home she'd ever known, away from Emma standing in the window with tears streaming down her face. Amelia watched Brooklyn slide past the rain-streaked windows, familiar streets turning unfamiliar in the darkness, corner stores and row houses giving way to wider avenues and taller buildings. They drove for what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, the city eventually surrendering to suburbs, then to countryside she'd only seen in movies. The rain continued its assault on the windshield, wipers working frantically to clear the view. Amelia's hand kept returning to the locket around her neck, thumb tracing the intricate engraving on its surface. Her mother had told her stories about this locket, about the women who'd worn it before her, about strength that ran in their blood like an inheritance. She'd need every drop of that strength now. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice sounding small in the expensive silence. "Upstate New York," Vincent replied. "Mr. Russo's estate. About 20 more minutes." Estate. Of course, someone who loaned out $250,000 would have an estate. "What's he like?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Vincent considered this. "Mr. Russo is a businessman. He values honesty, efficiency, and people keeping their commitments. He's fair, within the boundaries of his world. If you're respectful and reasonable, you'll find him the same. And if I'm not?" Amelia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "Then I would advise being respectful and reasonable," Vincent said simply. The SUV turned onto a private road lined with trees that looked ancient and expensive. Even in the rain and darkness, Amelia could sense the wealth surrounding them. Manicured lawns, stone walls, iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. The estate emerged from the darkness like something from another world. It was massive, not quite a mansion but close. All stone and elegant lines with lights glowing in windows that suggested warmth and life inside. Security lights illuminated the circular driveway, reflecting off the wet pavement like scattered diamonds. This was where her father's choices had led them, to this place of power and money that existed in a completely different universe from their cramped apartment and constant struggle. The SUV stopped at the main entrance. Vincent opened an umbrella and came around to her door, a gesture of courtesy that felt surreal given the circumstances. She stepped out into the rain, her worn sneakers splashing in puddles, her jacket immediately soaking through. They climbed the stone steps to a massive wooden door that opened before they reached it. A man in an impeccable suit, older, gray-haired with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades managing important things, nodded to Vincent. "She's expected in the study," he said simply, his eyes passing over Amelia with neither judgment nor interest. "Mr. Russo is ready." Amelia crossed the threshold into a world of dark wood, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of quiet that only comes from wealth insulating against the chaos of ordinary life. Her wet shoes squeaked against marble floors as she followed Vincent through a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. They stopped before another door, heavy, imposing, made of what looked like ancient oak. Vincent knocked twice, a coded rhythm, and a voice from inside responded. Deep, authoritative, cutting through the wood like it was paper. Enter. Vincent opened the door and gestured for Amelia to go inside. She took one breath, touched the locket at her throat one more time, and stepped forward into whatever came next. The study was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined two walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked actually read rather than decorative. A fireplace crackled with real flames, casting dancing shadows across Persian rugs and furniture that whispered of old money and older power. Rain lashed against tall windows, the storm creating a soundtrack of nature's indifference to human drama. And behind a massive desk sat Damien Rousseau. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and eyes that assessed her with the intensity of someone who missed nothing. He wore a simple black shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled to his elbows like he'd been working. There was a hardness to his features, a quality that said he'd seen and done things that left permanent marks on the soul. But it was his eyes that caught her, not cold exactly, but controlled. Like everything about him was a choice, carefully managed and precisely executed. He studied her in silence for a long moment, and Amelia fought the urge to look away or apologize for dripping rainwater on his expensive floor. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze, channeling every ounce of her mother's stubborn pride. Finally, Damien Rousseau spoke, his voice carrying the trace of an accent that suggested Italian roots and American education. "You're not Michael Carter." "No," Amelia replied, surprised her voice came out steady. "I'm Amelia Carter, his daughter. He's not available, so I'm here to discuss his situation." Something flickered across Damien's face. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. "I asked for the man who owes me $250,000. They brought me a girl who looks barely old enough to understand what that number means." The dismissiveness in his tone sparked anger in Amelia's chest, burning away some of the fear. "I'm 22. I understand numbers perfectly well, and I'm here because my father is a coward who runs from his problems. But his choices don't have to destroy my sister's life. So yes, you got me instead. What happens now?" Damien leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, studying her with new interest. The silence stretched, broken only by rain and crackling fire, while he seemed to be recalculating something in his mind. Then he stood, moving around the desk with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with power in his own body. He was tall, several inches over 6 feet, and his presence filled the room in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. He circled her slowly, and Amelia forced herself to remain still, to not flinch or step back. This was some kind of test, she realized. An assessment. "Tell me, Amelia Carter," he said, his voice coming from behind her now. "What exactly did your father tell you about his arrangement with my family?" "Nothing," she answered honestly. "He told us nothing. The first I heard about any of this was 20 minutes ago when your men showed up at our door. And yet here you are. You didn't run, didn't call the police, didn't try to negotiate or plead, you just came." He completed his circle, standing in front of her now, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Why?" Amelia's hand moved unconsciously to her locket, finding strength in the familiar metal. "Because running doesn't solve problems. It just makes them chase you. And my sister deserves better than spending her life looking over her shoulder because of mistakes our father made." Something shifted in Damien's expression, not softening exactly, but recognition of something he understood. Family loyalty. That at least I respect. He moved closer, and Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. He was studying her face, her features with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she refused. Then his gaze dropped to her throat, to where her fingers rested on her mother's locket. His eyes narrowed. "That's an unusual piece. Where did you get it?" "It was my mother's," Amelia said, defensive instinct making her hand close around it protectively. "It's been in her family for generations. Let me see it." It wasn't a request. Every fiber of Amelia's being screamed to refuse. This locket was hers, her mother's legacy, the one thing that connected her to the woman who'd loved her unconditionally. But she was standing in Damien Rousseau's study, in his world, playing by his rules. Still, something in her refused to just comply. "No," she said quietly. "Whatever arrangement we need to make about my father's situation, this isn't part of it. This is personal, and it's mine." The air in the study seemed to change, tension crackling like the fire. Vincent, still standing by the door, shifted almost imperceptibly. Even the rain seemed to pause. Damien's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise again? Or maybe respect. Then his hand moved, not threatening but firm, reaching for the locket. I said, "Let me see it." Time seemed to slow as his fingers closed around the silver, pulling it gently forward so it caught the light. Amelia's breath caught, not from fear, but from the violation of this intimate space. His fingers were warm where they brushed her collarbone, and she hated that she noticed. He turned the locket, examining the engraving on its surface with an expression that was transforming from curiosity to something else, something that looked like shock. "Open it," he commanded, his voice strange now, urgent. "I will not." His fingers moved to the clasp, and before Amelia could stop him, the locket sprang open in his hands. The tiny photograph inside was revealed. Her mother, young and beautiful, smiling at a camera with hope in her eyes. Damien Rousseau went completely still, the kind of still that comes before earthquakes and storms and moments that change everything. When he looked up at Amelia, his face had transformed into something she couldn't read. Disbelief, recognition, and questions she didn't understand swirling in his eyes. "Where?" he said slowly, each word careful and weighted. "Did your mother get this locket? And what was her maiden name?" "I don't understand why that matters." "Answer the question." Command, not request. But underneath it, something that sounded almost desperate. "Moretti," Amelia said, confused by his reaction. "Her name was Elena Moretti before she married my father. The locket came from her grandmother, passed down through the women in her family. Now tell me why that matters to you." The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Damien's hand was still on the locket, his fingers trembling slightly, the first sign of anything less than perfect control she'd seen from him. Then he spoke, his voice carrying a weight that changed everything. "Because Elena Moretti was my mother's sister. This locket belonged to my aunt who disappeared 25 years ago." His dark eyes bore into hers, searching for something. "Which means you and I share blood, Amelia Carter. Your family." The study spun around Amelia. Family. The word seemed impossible, absurd, a trick of some kind. But the way he was looking at her, and at the photograph of her mother, carried a certainty that couldn't be faked. Outside, the rain continued its assault on the windows, indifferent to the revelation that had just shattered 2 lives and rebuilt them into something neither could have imagined. The door behind them opened and a voice called out, "Mr. Rousseau, we've located Michael Carter. What are your instructions?" But Damien didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the interruption. He was still staring at Amelia, at the locket, at the impossible connection that had just revealed itself between a Mafia boss and the girl, sent to repay her father's debt. "Get out," he said quietly to whoever had entered, "and close the door. No one disturbs us." The door clicked shut. The fire crackled. The rain fell, and Amelia Carter realized that nothing about her life would ever be the same again. The silence in Damien Rousseau's study felt alive, pulsing with the weight of his revelation. Amelia's mind struggled to process the words that still hung in the air between them like smoke. Your family. It was impossible. Her mother had never mentioned relatives beyond her grandmother, who'd passed away before Amelia was born. Elena Moretti Carter had been a woman of secrets, but this felt too enormous to have kept hidden. "That's not possible," Amelia finally managed, her voice sounding distant even to her own ears. "My mother never mentioned any family. No siblings, no cousins, nothing. She said her family was complicated, that they'd lost touch." Damien's jaw tightened, and he finally released the locket, letting it fall back against Amelia's chest. The metal felt heavier now, weighted with meanings she didn't understand. He moved back to his desk, his movements controlled but carrying an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there before. "Lost touch," he repeated, and something bitter crept into his tone. "Is that what she called it? That's one way to describe abandoning your family in the middle of the night without explanation." He pulled open a drawer and extracted a photograph in a silver frame. Old, the colors slightly faded with time. He held it out to Amelia, and with trembling fingers, she took it. The photograph showed 2 women, both in their early 20s, standing in front of what looked like this very estate. They had their arms around each other, laughing at something beyond the camera's view. One of them Amelia recognized immediately. Older, yes, but unmistakably her mother. Young, vibrant, her dark hair catching the sunlight. The other woman had Damien's eyes. My mother, Sophia Rousseau, and her younger sister Elena Moretti. Damien said quietly. This was taken about 6 months before Elena disappeared. She was 18. She left a note saying she needed to find her own path, that she couldn't live the life that had been chosen for her. We searched for years. My mother never stopped looking, never stopped hoping she'd come back. It broke something in her when Elena vanished. Amelia stared at the photograph, at her mother's smile. So free, so unguarded. She'd never seen her mother look like that in person. By the time Amelia was old enough to remember, Elena had already been worn down by life with Michael Carter, already sick with the illness that would eventually claim her. She never told us, Amelia whispered, about any of this, about you, about this family, about where she came from. She said her past wasn't important, that our family started with her and Dad, because she knew what acknowledging this family would mean, Damien replied, moving to the window where rain continued to streak down the glass. His reflection was ghostly in the dark pane. The Moretti family merged with the Russos through my parents' marriage. It was a union of two powerful families, creating obligations and expectations. Elena was promised to another family as part of a business arrangement. She would have been 18 when the marriage was supposed to happen. Understanding dawned cold and heavy in Amelia's chest. She ran from an arranged marriage. She ran from her responsibilities, Damien corrected, but there was less conviction in his voice now. From her family, her name, her blood, she chose poverty and anonymity over honoring her commitments. She chose freedom, Amelia countered, anger flaring hot and protective. She chose to live her own life instead of being traded like property. Can you blame her for that? Damien turned from the window, and for the first time, his controlled mask slipped slightly. She saw conflict there, old questions that had never been answered warring with the code he'd been raised to uphold. No, he admitted finally. I don't blame her. I was 16 when she left, old enough to understand that the life we lived wasn't for everyone. But my mother blamed herself. She thought she'd failed Elena somehow, hadn't protected her from the weight of expectations. She carried that guilt until she passed 5 years ago. The admission hung between them, vulnerability from a man who clearly didn't show it often. Amelia's hand went to the locket again, understanding its weight differently now. This wasn't just her mother's legacy. It was a piece of a larger story, of women trying to survive in worlds that wanted to control them. I'm sorry, she said softly, for your mother's pain, for all of it. But my mother built a good life in her own way. She loved us fiercely, protected us, taught us to be strong. She might have left this world behind, but she didn't waste the freedom she chose. And yet her daughter ends up standing in this very study, brought here because of a man's cowardice, Damien observed, something dark crossing his features. She escaped, but her bloodline found its way back anyway. That's either fate or cruel irony. A knock at the door interrupted whatever Amelia might have said. Damien's expression shifted instantly back to that controlled authority. The momentary vulnerability sealed away. Enter, he commanded. The door opened to reveal a man Amelia hadn't seen before. Mid-40s, built like someone who'd spent decades in physical confrontation, with sharp eyes that assessed everything. But there was intelligence there too. Strategy behind the muscle. Boss, we have him. Michael Carter is in the East Wing, waiting as you instructed, and the family is gathering in the main room. They heard there was a development in the Carter situation. Damien nodded, then glanced at Amelia. Something passed across his face. Calculation, decision, the working of a mind that operated on levels she couldn't follow. Marco, I need you to pull every record we have on Elena Moretti. Everything from before she left. Photographs, documents, any information about her grandmother's family line. I want confirmation of lineage. Marco's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise. Boss, just do it, and tell the family I'll address them shortly. The situation has become complicated. Marco's eyes slid to Amelia with new interest, clearly trying to understand what had shifted in the room, but he simply nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. Amelia's mind had snagged on one phrase. My father, he's here? He was located about 20 minutes ago at a motel 3 towns over. My people brought him in while we were talking. Damien returned to his desk, settling into his chair with the ease of someone completely comfortable with power. He'll wait until I decide what to do with him. I want to see him. The words came out harder than Amelia intended. Anger she'd been suppressing for 3 days suddenly surging forward. He left us. Disappeared without a word while men came to our door because of his choices. I want to look him in the eye and hear him explain why. Damien studied her for a long moment. That can be arranged. But first, we need to establish what happens next. The complication of your bloodline doesn't erase the reality of your father's obligation. $250,000, plus 3 months of accumulated interest. The numbers don't care about family connections. So what are you saying? Amelia asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. That even though we're apparently related, my father's situation still stands. The family operates on rules, Amelia. Without those rules, without consequences for broken agreements, everything falls apart. Your father entered into a contract. He used the money, yes, initially for your mother's medical care, but then for his own purposes. Gambling establishments across 3 states have records of his activity. He made choices, and choices have costs. The clinical way he outlined it made Amelia's anger burn hotter. So what's the cost for his daughter? What exactly did I agree to by coming here tonight? You didn't agree to anything yet, Damien replied. But let me be clear about the situation. Your father owes an impossible sum that he can never repay through conventional means. In normal circumstances, there would be consequences that would extend to his family, not through harm, but through obligation. Assets would be seized. Family members would work to repay the debt through service to our legitimate business operations. You mean we'd be indentured, Amelia said flatly, forced to work for you until some arbitrary determination that the debt was settled. I prefer to think of it as structured repayment through employment opportunities, Damien countered, but there was no humor in it. But yes, essentially, it's business, not personal. Although now, he paused, something complicated crossing his features. Now it is personal, because if your lineage is confirmed, and I have little doubt it will be, then you carry Moretti blood, and family complicates everything. So what? You'll let us go because we're distantly related? Amelia didn't dare hope, but she had to ask. Damien's laugh was short and without joy. It's not that simple. If you're family, then there are protections, yes. The code says blood protects blood, but there are also people in this organization, in other organizations, who would see your connection as a threat or an opportunity. Elena Moretti's disappearance left questions, resentments, broken arrangements. Her daughter appearing after all these years? That opens old wounds. I didn't ask for any of this, Amelia said, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last hour was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. I didn't even know this world existed until tonight. I just want my sister to be safe and to have a chance at a normal life. Something softened, almost imperceptibly, in Damien's expression. Your sister, Emma, correct? She's 17, applying for college scholarships. The fact that he knew these details sent ice through Amelia's veins. You've been watching us. I've been watching your father for months. Due diligence on the loan. You and your sister were noted as potential leverage points if he defaulted, which he did. He held up a hand as Amelia's face flushed with anger. Standard procedure, nothing more. But it means I know Emma is exceptional. Top of her class, volunteer work at the community center, essays that apparently made her English teacher cry. She deserves the opportunities she's working toward. Then let her have them, Amelia pleaded, pride forgotten in the face of her sister's future. Whatever needs to happen to resolve this situation, it happens to me. Emma stays completely out of it. She goes to college, lives her life, never has any contact with this world. That's my condition. You're in no position to make conditions, a new voice said from the doorway. Amelia spun to see a woman entering the study, late 50s, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and older power, with sharp eyes that assessed Amelia like a balance sheet. 2 men flanked her, both carrying themselves with the confidence of those high in whatever hierarchy governed this family. Damien's expression tightened fractionally. Aunt Carla, I didn't call for a family council yet. No, but Marco's very interesting request for historical records did, Carla replied, moving further into the room with the presumption of someone who had every right to be there. Her gaze fixed on Amelia with an intensity that made her want to step back. He said you claimed this girl was connected to Elena. I needed to see for myself. She circled Amelia much as Damien had earlier, but where his assessment had been calculating, hers felt like judgment. She has the bone structure, the coloring, and those eyes. Moretti eyes, definitely. But plenty of people share features. What proof do you have beyond wishful thinking? The locket, Damien said quietly. Show her, Amelia. Part of Amelia wanted to refuse, to protect this last piece of her mother from these strangers' scrutiny. But she also understood that this locket might be the only thing standing between Emma and this world. So she lifted it, let the light catch its engraved surface. Carla's breath caught audibly. One of her hands rose to her mouth, and for a moment the hardness in her expression cracked. Santa Maria, that's Elena's locket. Her grandmother gave it to her on her 16th birthday. I was there. I remember. She reached out, and Amelia let her take it, let her open it and see the photograph inside. Carla stared at the image of young Elena for a long moment, and when she looked up, there were tears threatening in her eyes. I was supposed to be at her wedding, she said softly. I had already purchased my dress, and then she was just gone. Left a note saying she couldn't live that life, that she needed to be free. Broke Sophia's heart. Broke all of our hearts. Her gaze sharpened on Amelia. What happened to her? Where has she been all these years? She passed away 3 years ago, Amelia said quietly. Illness. She married, had 2 daughters, worked as a nurse. She lived in Brooklyn her whole adult life. Brooklyn, Carla repeated as if the borough represented exile from everything familiar. Elena Moretti, who grew up in this house, who was educated in the best schools, lived in Brooklyn as a nurse, and never once reached out, never once let her family know she was alive. She built a different life, Amelia defended. Maybe it wasn't the one you would have chosen, but it was hers. And she was happy, as much as circumstances allowed. And yet here stands her daughter, brought to us because of a man's cowardice and impossible debt. One of the men said, younger than Carla, maybe late 30s, with calculating eyes. Coincidence or strategy? You think I planned this, Dante? Amelia asked incredulously. That I somehow orchestrated my father's situation to get into this house? I think people have used more elaborate schemes for less, Dante replied coolly. The daughter of a woman who disappeared mysteriously shows up at exactly the moment when it would be most advantageous? It raises questions. Then ask your questions, Amelia shot back, anger overriding caution. But do it quickly, because I have a 17-year-old sister at home who's terrified and alone, and I need to know she's going to be okay regardless of what games you all play. Games? Carla's voice went cold. Child, you stand in a room with people who control more wealth and influence than you can imagine. This isn't a game. This is family, business, legacy. Every action has consequences that ripple out in ways you can't begin to understand. Then help me understand, Amelia demanded, turning to face all of them. Damien behind his desk, Carla and her companions forming a wall of judgment. What happens now? Do you confirm I'm Elena's daughter, and then what? Everything's forgiven? We all have a tearful reunion? Or does the debt still stand, and I'm just a more interesting form of collateral? The question hung in the air, unanswered, until Damien spoke. Marco will run the verification, DNA comparison with family samples we have on file, document analysis of the locket and any other materials. It will take a few days. Until then, Amelia stays here as a guest, not a prisoner. She'll be given appropriate accommodations and treated with respect due to someone who may be family. And her father? Dante asked. Damien's expression hardened. Michael Carter stays secured until we determine how to handle his situation. His debt remains real regardless of his daughter's bloodline. He'll be interviewed and will establish exactly where the money went and why he thought running was an acceptable option. I want to see him, Amelia repeated, more forcefully now. Before anything else happens, I want to talk to my father. Carla looked at Damien, something passing between them. A question and answer in a language Amelia didn't speak. Finally, Damien nodded. Fine, but I'm coming with you, and it will be brief. He doesn't get to manipulate you or make promises he can't keep. He stood, buttoning his shirt cuffs with precise movements. Carla, have Marco expedite the verification. I want answers by tomorrow evening. And keep this quiet. If word spreads that Elena's daughter is here before we understand what it means, it creates complications we don't need. Carla nodded, though her expression suggested she had thoughts she was keeping to herself. Come, Dante. We have arrangements to make. She paused at the door, looking back at Amelia. Child, whatever your mother told you about this family, about this life, understand that you're only seeing shadows of the truth. Be careful what you wish to claim. Then she was gone, taking Dante and the silent companion with her, leaving Amelia alone again with Damien Russo. He moved around the desk, pulling on a jacket that had been draped over his chair. The East Wing is this way. Your father is being held in one of the secured rooms. It's comfortable, but he can't leave. Are you ready for this? Amelia's hand went to her locket one more time, drawing strength from the metal that had apparently traveled a much longer journey than she'd ever known. I've been ready to confront him since the moment he disappeared 3 days ago. Let's go. They walked through hallways that seemed designed to remind visitors of their insignificance. High ceilings, expensive art, the kind of quiet that only came from perfect insulation from the outside world. Damien walked slightly ahead, his presence commanding even in silence. Can I ask you something? Amelia ventured after a few minutes. You can ask. I may not answer. If I am your cousin, if the verification confirms it, what does that actually mean in your world? What changes? Damien was quiet for several steps, considering. It means you're protected by family rules. No one can move against you without answering to me and the family council. It means you have claim to certain resources, certain rights. But it also means you have responsibilities. Family isn't just privilege here. It's obligation. And it means your father's debt becomes more complicated to resolve because it involves family honor, in ways that go beyond money. That's not really an answer, Amelia observed. Because I don't have the full answer yet, Damien admitted. This situation is unprecedented. Elena's disappearance left questions that never got resolved. Her daughter appearing after all these years? That's going to create ripples I can't fully predict. Some in the family will see you as a blessing, a piece of Elena returned to us. Others will see you as a complication or even a threat. Threat? I'm a waitress and bookstore clerk from Brooklyn. How am I threatening to anyone? Damien stopped walking and turned to face her, and in the hallway's dim lighting his eyes looked almost black. Because bloodlines matter in this world. Because Elena's disappearance broke contracts and created resentments that still exist. Because your existence raises questions about inheritance, about loyalty, about what it means to abandon family and whether that can be forgiven through the next generation. I don't want anything from your family, Amelia said firmly. I just want my sister safe and this debt resolved so we can go back to our lives. That's admirable. It's also naive. Damien resumed walking. You're already involved now, Amelia. The moment you walked into my study, the moment you showed me that locket, you became part of something bigger than your wants. The only question is what role you'll play. They reached a door flanked by two men who nodded to Damien with obvious respect. He unlocked it with a key from his pocket and pushed it open, gesturing for Amelia to enter first. The room beyond was indeed comfortable, nicer than her apartment certainly. A bed, sitting area, even a small bathroom visible through an open door, and sitting in an armchair by the window, looking smaller and more pathetic than she remembered, was Michael Carter. Her father looked up as she entered, and the mix of relief and guilt that crossed his face made Amelia's hands clench into fists. He stood, started to move toward her, but something in her expression stopped him mid-step. Mia, he said, her name coming out broken. Thank God. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Did they hurt me? Amelia repeated, her voice deadly quiet. That's your first question? Not, I'm sorry I disappeared? Not, I'm sorry I borrowed $250,000 from dangerous people? Not, I'm sorry I left you and Emma alone to deal with my mistakes? Michael's face crumpled. I can explain. Then explain. Amelia cut him off. Explain why you took money you could never repay. Explain why you kept borrowing more even after Mom died. Explain why you ran away instead of facing what you'd done. I thought I could fix it, Michael said desperately. I thought if I could just get one big win, just turn things around, I could pay everything back and you girls would never need to know. But the luck never came and the debt kept growing and he broke off, tears streaming down his face. I'm weak, Mia. I'm a coward. Your mother knew it and now you know it too. I failed all of you. The admission should have felt satisfying, but it just made Amelia feel hollow. You did fail us, Dad. You failed us every day for 3 years while we struggled to survive. And tonight, men came to our door because of your choices. And you know what I had to do? I had to volunteer to come here to whatever this is to keep Emma safe, because you weren't there to protect your own daughter. I'm sorry, Michael sobbed. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I never meant for any of this. Your intentions don't matter anymore. Damien's voice cut in from behind Amelia, cold and final. What matters is the debt, and how it gets resolved. Michael Carter, you borrowed money under specific terms. You used some for legitimate medical expenses which the family accepted as reasonable, but you used the majority for personal gambling activities, which was explicitly forbidden in your agreement. You violated the terms, made yourself unavailable, and forced us to involve your family. Do you understand the seriousness of your situation? Michael's tear-stained face went pale. Mr. Russo, please. I'll do anything. I'll work for you, whatever you need. Just please don't hurt my daughters. They're innocent in all this. Your daughters, Damien said, something strange in his voice, are more complicated than you understand. But that's not your concern right now. Your concern is explaining exactly where every dollar went and why you thought running was an acceptable response to your obligations. He gestured to the men outside the door. Take him to the accounting room. I want a full financial interview. Everywhere the money went, every decision he made, everything. And get me documentation of the original loan terms. As the men moved to escort Michael out, he reached toward Amelia one more time. Mia, please. Tell Emma I love her. Tell her I'm sorry. Amelia looked at the man who'd given her life but failed to protect it, and felt nothing but exhaustion. Tell her yourself if you ever get the chance. But don't expect forgiveness just because you're sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Dad. It never has. Michael was led out, still crying, and the door closed behind him with a finality that felt like an ending. Amelia stood in the middle of the comfortable prison, arms wrapped around herself, feeling like she might shatter into pieces. That wasn't easy for you, Damien observed quietly. He was my father, Amelia replied, her voice thick. Once upon a time, before Mom got sick, before everything fell apart, he was a good dad. He taught me to ride a bike. He made pancakes on Sundays. He told terrible jokes that made us all laugh. I keep trying to find that person, but I don't think he exists anymore. People break, Damien said, something in his tone suggesting personal experience. Grief, pressure, weakness. They find the cracks and push until something gives. Your father broke. It doesn't excuse his choices, but it explains them. And now I'm here, dealing with consequences that aren't mine, protecting a sister who deserves better, all because he couldn't handle his own life. Amelia turned to face Damien, surprising herself with her own boldness. You asked earlier what I want. I want my sister to go to college. I want her to never have to worry about any of this. Whatever it takes to make that happen, working for you, staying here, whatever, I'll do it. That's my offer. My father's debt becomes mine, and Emma goes free. Completely free with no connections to any of this. Damien studied her for a long moment, and Amelia couldn't read what she saw in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or calculation, or something more complicated. Let's wait for the verification results, he said finally. If you are family, the situation changes in ways that make your offer both more and less relevant. Until then, you're my guest. I'll have someone show you to a room. You'll have access to a phone to call your sister, clothes, anything you need. But you don't leave the estate grounds, understood? It wasn't really a question, but Amelia nodded anyway. She was trapped here regardless, bound by invisible chains forged from blood, debt, and a locket that had traveled across decades to bring her to this moment. One more thing, Damien said as he opened the door. Your mother, Elena, did she ever talk about this life? About what she left behind? Amelia thought back to whispered conversations, to moments when her mother seemed far away, lost in memories she never shared. She said she came from a world where women were property, where love was a luxury you couldn't afford. She said she chose poverty and freedom over wealth and control, that she never regretted it, even when things were hardest. Did she mention anyone specifically? My mother, her family, anything? No, Amelia said softly. She kept her past locked away, but sometimes, especially near the end, she'd hold that locket and cry. I asked her once why it made her sad. She said it reminded her of the girl she used to be before life taught her that freedom always costs more than you think you'll have to pay. Damien's expression flickered with something. Grief, understanding, old pain surfacing. My mother held on to hope for years that Elena would come back. She never accepted that her sister chose to leave. It haunted her until she passed. I'm sorry, Amelia said, and meant it, for all the pain this caused. But my mother built something good with her freedom, even if it was hard. She raised us to be strong, to fight for ourselves, to never let anyone make us into something we're not. That was her legacy, and it's worth more than any of this. She gestured to the expensive surroundings. Maybe, Damien conceded, or maybe she taught you strength, because she knew you'd need it to survive the world she tried to escape. Either way, you're here now, and tomorrow we'll know if that locket represents blood or just sentiment. He led her back through the hallways to another wing of the estate, stopping at a door that opened to reveal a bedroom larger than Amelia's entire apartment. Everything was elegant, expensive, and felt like a beautiful cage. Someone will bring you clothes and anything else you need. The phone is on the nightstand. You can call your sister, but keep it brief and don't mention where you are or why. Just that you're safe and handling the situation. Understood? Amelia nodded, exhaustion finally overwhelming everything else. When will I know? About the verification? Tomorrow evening, most likely. Marco is efficient when it matters. Damien paused in the doorway, something complicated crossing his features. For what it's worth, I hope it's confirmed. Elena's daughter coming back. My mother would have wanted that. She never stopped believing family could find its way home. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Amelia alone in a room that smelled of lavender and expensive linens, holding a locket that had just rewritten everything she thought she knew about herself. She pulled out the phone and dialed Emma's number with shaking fingers. Her sister answered on the first ring, voice thick with tears. Mia? Oh my God, Mia, where are you? Are you okay? What's happening? I'm safe, Em. I promise. I can't explain everything right now, but I'm handling it. How are you? Are you okay? How am I okay? Those men took you. Where did they take you? Should I call the police? No, Amelia said quickly. No police. That would make things worse. Just stay home, keep studying, and trust me. This is going to work out, but I need you to be strong for a little while longer. Can you do that? Emma was crying now. Really crying. I'm scared, Mia. I don't understand what's happening. I know, baby. I know. But remember what Mom always said? Carter women are survivors. We find a way through impossible things. You just focus on your scholarship essay and let me handle this, okay? Promise you'll come home, Emma begged. Promise you're really safe. Amelia looked around the elegant room at the life she'd stumbled into, at the locket resting against her heart that apparently connected her to a family she'd never known existed. I promise I'm safe, and I promise I'm going to fix this. I love you, Emma, so much. Now get some sleep. She ended the call before her own tears could start, before the fear and exhaustion could crack her open completely. Then she sank onto the bed that felt like clouds, in a house that felt like a dream or nightmare, she couldn't tell which, and finally let herself break down. Tomorrow would bring answers about her blood, her family, her future. But tonight she was just a 22-year-old girl who discovered her mother's greatest secret and wasn't sure whether it would save her or destroy everything she had left. Outside the window, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear November night where stars shone cold and distant. And somewhere in this massive house, Damian Russo sat in his study, holding a photograph of his mother and her lost sister, wondering if the past had just come back to haunt him, or to heal wounds that had never properly closed. The Locket's secret had been revealed. Now they would all have to live with the consequences. Morning came too early, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and pulling Amelia from restless sleep. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back with the weight of everything that had happened the night before. She was in Damian Russo's estate. Her father owed $250,000, and she might be related to the family that now held her fate in their hands. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. "Come in," she called, her voice rough from exhaustion. A woman in her 30s entered, carrying a tray of coffee and pastries, followed by another woman with an armful of clothing. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Mr. Russo thought you might need these. The bathroom is stocked with everything you should need. He's requested you join him for breakfast in an hour." It wasn't an invitation. It was a command dressed in courtesy. Amelia nodded, accepting the coffee gratefully. The women left, and she found herself alone with expensive clothes in her size and the surreal reality of her situation. 45 minutes later, showered and dressed in clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent, Amelia made her way downstairs following the directions she'd been given. The estate felt different in daylight, less intimidating but no less imposing. She could see the grounds through windows, manicured lawns stretching toward distant tree lines that probably marked the property boundaries. Damien was in a sunlit breakfast room, reading something on a tablet while drinking espresso. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You slept?" "Not much," Amelia admitted, taking the seat across from him. "Hard to sleep when your entire life gets turned upside down in one night." "Fair enough." He poured her coffee from a silver pot. "I've been reviewing the financial documentation on your father's loan. The initial amount was $50,000 taken out 3 years ago for medical expenses. That was legitimate and was being repaid on schedule. Then he took out additional loans. Smaller amounts at first, then larger. Each time claiming emergencies, opportunities, reasons that seemed plausible. But they weren't emergencies," Amelia said quietly. "No, Marco's team tracked the money. Gaming establishments, online betting platforms, even some high-stakes card games in Atlantic City. Your father has a significant problem, Amelia. This wasn't just bad luck, it's a pattern of behavior that spans years. The words hurt despite knowing they were true. My mother didn't know. She died thinking he'd used that first loan to save her life, never knowing he kept taking more. Perhaps that's a mercy, Damien observed. Some truths are heavier than the dying should carry. Before Amelia could respond, Marco entered the room, carrying a folder. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could sense tension in the set of his shoulders. Boss, the preliminary results are back. You'll want to see this privately. Damien's eyes flicked to Amelia, then back to Marco. She's involved. Whatever you have to say it here. Marco hesitated, then opened the folder, placing documents on the table between them. DNA comparison with family samples confirms it. Amelia Carter shares genetic markers consistent with being Elena Moretti's daughter, and by extension, related to the Russo-Moretti bloodline. The locket has been authenticated as well. It matches photographs from the family archives, and the engraving is consistent with work done by the jeweler the Moretti family used exclusively in the 1960s. The room seemed to hold its breath. Amelia stared at the documents covered in technical language she didn't fully understand, but the conclusion was clear. So it's confirmed, she said softly. I really am family. Yes? Damien replied, something complicated in his voice, which changes everything and nothing simultaneously. What do you mean? Amelia asked. Marco answered before Damien could. It means you're protected by family code. No one can move against you without consequence. But it also means your father's debt becomes a family matter, which is actually more complicated. When outsiders owe us money, the resolution is straightforward. When it involves family, there are councils, votes, politics. I don't understand, Amelia said. Why would it being a family matter make it harder? Damien leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Because your father married into the family, even if he didn't know it. That creates obligations and protections that didn't exist when he was just a man who borrowed money. And because Elena's disappearance was never properly resolved, your existence raises questions about inheritance, about whether her line has claims to family resources. I don't want anything, Amelia said firmly. I already told you that. What you want and what others will assume are different things, Damien replied. Aunt Carla is already making calls, rallying certain family members who see your arrival as either opportunity or threat. There are those who never forgave Elena for leaving, who see you as carrying that same betrayal in your blood. And there are others who view you as a chance to right old wrongs, to bring Elena's line back into the family fold. And you? Amelia asked quietly. What do you see me as? Damien was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face as if searching for answers written there. I see someone who got caught in the crossfire of other people's decisions, but I also see someone with more strength than they realize. The question is what we do with that. The family council is being convened for tomorrow night, Marco interjected. They'll want to meet Amelia, verify the claim personally, and vote on how to handle the situation. Vote on my life, you mean? Amelia said. Vote on how family resources and protections apply to your situation, Damien corrected. Your father's debt still exists. The money is still owed. But how we resolve it, whether you work it off through legitimate employment, whether it's partially forgiven due to your bloodline, whether we pursue your father for restitution, that requires consensus among family leadership. Amelia's head was spinning. This is insane. Yesterday I was a waitress worried about making rent. Today I'm apparently part of some Mafia dynasty with councils and votes about my fate. Welcome to the family, Marco said dryly, earning a sharp look from Damien. In the meantime, Damien continued, you'll stay here. I'm having Marco set up a position for you at one of our legitimate businesses, an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. You'll start next week, assuming the council approves the arrangement. It's honest work, good pay, and it begins addressing the debt without putting you in any compromising situations. And Emma? Amelia asked immediately. Your sister remains untouched by any of this, Damien assured her. I've already arranged for a trust to be established covering her college expenses. Tuition, housing, books, everything. Consider it a family investment in the next generation. Amelia's throat tightened. Why would you do that? Because she's innocent in this and because Elena's granddaughter deserves opportunities her grandmother never had. Call it compensation for the years your mother spent in exile from her family. It was a generous gesture that Amelia knew came with invisible strings. Everything in this world seemed to, but Emma's future was worth more than her pride. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. Over the next hour, they discussed the details, the restaurant position, the apartment in the city where Amelia would live, the terms of her employment that would gradually reduce her father's debt. It all sounded reasonable, almost normal, except for the underlying reality that she was being absorbed into a world she'd never asked to join. What about my father? Amelia finally asked. What happens to him? Damien's expression hardened. He'll face the council as well. His actions have consequences, Amelia. Family connection or not, he borrowed money under false pretenses and ran when accountability came due. At minimum, he'll be required to work under supervision for the family, his earnings going directly toward the debt. His freedom will be limited. You mean he'll be a prisoner? I mean he'll be monitored and managed until the debt is satisfied, which, given his demonstrated unreliability, is necessary. Damien stood, signaling the conversation's end. You should spend today getting familiar with the grounds. Tomorrow will be challenging. Meeting the full family council, answering their questions, proving you're who you claim to be. I thought the DNA proved it, Amelia said. Science proves genetics. The council will want to prove character, intent, whether you're worthy of the family name. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I believe you are. But I'm only one voice among many. After he left, Amelia sat alone in the breakfast room, the autumn sun streaming through the windows, illuminating a life she'd never imagined and wasn't sure she wanted. She touched the locket at her throat, thinking about her mother who'd fled this world, wondering if Elena would be proud or horrified to know her daughter had been pulled back into it. The next day arrived with gray skies and cold wind, matching Amelia's anxious mood. She dressed carefully in clothes that had been provided, elegant but not ostentatious, professional but not submissive. She was playing a role she didn't fully understand in a performance where the stakes were her entire future. The council meeting was held in a formal dining room that had been converted into something resembling a courtroom. A long table sat at the front where 7 people arranged themselves, Carla, Dante, and others Amelia didn't recognize, all studying her with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Damien stood to the side, not at the table but clearly present. His eyes met hers as she entered, and something in his gaze steadied her. Whatever was about to happen, she wasn't completely alone. Amelia Carter, Carla began, her voice formal and carrying. You stand before this family council claiming blood relation to Elena Moretti, sister to Sophia Russo, aunt to our current leadership. DNA evidence supports this claim. However, bloodline alone does not guarantee acceptance or protection within this family. We have questions and you will answer them truthfully. Do you understand? I understand, Amelia replied, lifting her chin and meeting Carla's gaze directly. First question, said a man Amelia didn't know, older with silver hair and calculating eyes. Did your mother ever speak about this family? Did she tell you about her past, her connections, her reasons for leaving? No, Amelia answered honestly. She kept her past private. She only said she came from a world she couldn't live in where choices weren't her own. She never mentioned names or details. Convenient, Dante murmured. A mother who told her daughter nothing, yet somehow the daughter appears at exactly the right moment with exactly the right evidence. My father created this situation, not me, Amelia said firmly. I didn't know any of this existed until 2 days ago. If you're suggesting I manipulated circumstances to gain access to your family, you're giving me credit for schemes I'm not capable of creating. Yet here you stand, another council member observed, claiming protections and resources because of blood you never acknowledged until it became convenient. I'm not claiming anything, Amelia countered, anger giving her courage. I came here because my father's cowardice left me no choice. I found out about my mother's family the same night you did. If you want to reject me, fine. Just let my sister go free, and I'll work off this debt however you require. Your sister, Carla said thoughtfully. Emma, 17, exceptional student, planning to attend college. She knows nothing of this world? Nothing, Amelia confirmed. And I want to keep it that way. Whatever happens to me, she deserves to live a normal life. Murmurs ran through the council. Carla exchanged glances with the others, some silent communication passing between them that Amelia couldn't interpret. Finally, Carla spoke. The council has discussed your situation extensively. The DNA evidence is conclusive. You are Elena's daughter, which makes you family. However, your father's debt remains valid and must be addressed. After consideration, we've reached the following decision. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs as Carla continued. You will be given a position managing one of our legitimate restaurant operations in Manhattan. Your salary will be fair and appropriate to the work, with a portion going toward your father's debt repayment. Your sister will receive full educational funding through a family trust. This is not a loan or obligation, but a gift to honor Elena's memory. Your father will work under family supervision in one of our construction businesses. His earnings also applied to the debt. Between your efforts and his, the obligation should be satisfied within 5 years. 5 years. The number echoed in Amelia's mind. Half a decade of her life bound to this family, this world. However, Carla added, you will also be formally recognized as Elena Moretti's daughter and accepted into the family with all rights and protections that entails. You'll be expected to attend family gatherings, learn our history and traditions, and conduct yourself in a manner befitting the family name. Is this acceptable to you? It wasn't really a question, more like an announcement of terms, but compared to what Amelia had feared, it was almost generous. Yes, she said, I accept. Then welcome home, Amelia Moretti Carter, Carla said, and something that might have been approval flickered in her eyes. Your mother left us 25 years ago. Perhaps through you, she's finally found her way back. The meeting ended, council members departing with nods and assessing looks. Damien approached as the room emptied, his expression unreadable. That went better than I expected, he said quietly. Did it? Amelia asked. I just signed away 5 years of my life. You secured your sister's future and gave your father a chance at redemption. In this world, that's a victory. He gestured toward the door. Come on, I'll show you the restaurant where you'll be working. Consider it orientation for your new life. As they walked toward the car that would take them to Manhattan, Amelia realized the weight of what had just happened. She was no longer just Amelia Carter from Brooklyn. She was now Amelia Moretti Carter, acknowledged member of a family she'd never known existed, bound by blood to a world her mother had fled. The locket rested against her heart, its weight both burden and blessing. Her mother had chosen freedom at great cost. Now Amelia had chosen protection, for herself, for Emma, for a future that looked nothing like what she'd imagined just days ago. As the estate disappeared behind them and Manhattan's skyline appeared ahead, Amelia wondered what Elena would think of her daughter's choice. Would she understand? Would she approve? Or would she weep for the freedom her daughter had traded away to protect the family Elena had loved enough to build in her exile? The car drove on through the autumn afternoon, carrying Amelia toward a future written in obligations she was only beginning to understand, in a family that had claimed her whether she'd wanted it or not. Blood, it turned out, didn't erase debt. It just made the accounting more complicated. 3 months passed in a blur of 18-hour days and carefully constructed normalcy. Amelia proved herself at the restaurant, managing staff, handling demanding clients, discovering she had a natural talent for business that had been dormant her entire life. Emma was thriving at a private prep school, her scholarship essay having won her opportunities Amelia had only dreamed of. They spoke weekly, carefully avoiding any mention of how dramatically their lives had changed. And Damien had become something Amelia couldn't quite define. He visited the restaurant frequently, too frequently for simple business oversight. They'd share late dinners after closing, conversations that started professional and drifted into personal territory neither acknowledged aloud. Your mother, he said one November evening, the restaurant empty except for them. She would have been proud of what you've built here. I've built? Amelia laughed softly. This is your family's restaurant, but you made it something more. His eyes held hers across the table. You have her gift for making people feel seen, valued. My mother talked about that, how Elena could walk into any room and make everyone feel important. The moment stretched, charged with something dangerous and undeniable. Then his phone rang. Marco, urgent. Within minutes, everything changed. A rival family had learned about Amelia's connection to Damien. An attempt was made outside the restaurant. His security intervened, but Amelia was injured. Nothing serious, but enough to unleash something primal in Damien. At the hospital, he held her hand with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. This is my fault, he said hoarsely. I should have kept you at a distance. Maybe I don't want distance, Amelia whispered. Their eyes met. Years of loneliness and carefully maintained walls crumbling in an instant. When he kissed her, it felt like falling and flying simultaneously. Dangerous, inevitable, and utterly right. Outside, The city continued its indifferent rhythm, but inside that sterile hospital room, everything had shifted. They'd crossed a line neither could uncross. The game had changed, and neither of them knew if they'd survive what came next. The attack made Damien's advisors demand action, send Amelia away or use her as bait. He refused both, making an unprecedented decision. The debt was paid in full. She was free to leave. Amelia stood in his study, the same room where everything had begun, holding the freedom she'd fought for, and discovering she didn't want it anymore. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," she said fiercely. "I choose this. I choose you." Instead of hiding, they went on the offensive. Amelia's business insight uncovered the rival family's financial vulnerabilities. In a tense negotiation, they presented evidence that could destroy their enemies, alongside an unexpected ally. Sophia, the restaurant manager, revealed herself as undercover FBI, offering a deal that would bring down the rivals while protecting Damien's legitimate operations. 6 months later, Amelia brought Emma to meet Damien properly. Her sister's approval felt like the final piece falling into place. On the restaurant rooftop at sunset, Amelia and Damien stood together, the locket now shared between them, a symbol of family found, love earned, and freedom chosen on her own terms. "Your mother ran from this life," Damien said softly. "Because she found something worth fighting for," Amelia replied, taking his hand. "Now I have too." The debt had brought her here, but love, dangerous, complicated, real, had made her stay. She was no longer the girl sent to repay her father's mistakes. She was Amelia Moretti Carter, who'd walked into darkness and found light in the most unexpected place. She'd come to settle a debt. Instead, she'd found home.